Boss fired me after 11 years to hide his voice. Recording of what he did with $3 million. As I cleared my desk, he announced a restructuring success to the board. My name is Archer Wolf. I'm 35 years old and I work as a digital evidence analyst in Denver, Colorado. What I thought was routine corporate downsizing turned into the biggest case of my career. Not because I was looking for trouble, but because trouble had been sitting in my secured digital files for months waiting for the right moment to surface. Effective immediately, we're eliminating your position, Sterling Blackwood said that Tuesday morning, his voice carrying the rehearsed tone of someone who'd practiced this conversation. He sat behind his mahogany desk at Titanium Dynamics, not meeting my eyes as he delivered the news. I nodded quietly, keeping my hands steady on the chair arms. I understand completely. Sterling seemed surprised by my calm response. Maybe he'd expected anger or desperation. Instead, I just sat there processing what this meant for the evidence I'd been analyzing for the past 6 months. The severance package is generous, he continued, sliding a folder across his desk. 2 months' salary, full benefits through year-end. That's fair, I replied, though my mind was elsewhere. Specifically on the encrypted drive in my home office containing audio files that Sterling definitely didn't want anyone else to hear. After the meeting, I walked back to my analysis lab on the 14th floor of Blackstone Tower. 11 years of building Titanium Dynamics' digital evidence department, and it all fit into 3 cardboard boxes. My specialized data recovery equipment, the secure workstation I'd configured myself, the cases that had saved the company millions in litigation costs. Raven Cross, Sterling's assistant, appeared in my doorway as I was packing. I'm sorry about this, Archer. It doesn't seem right. Business decisions rarely do, I said, wrapping my custom microphone array in bubble wrap. Sterling's got his reasons. What I didn't tell Raven was that I knew exactly what those reasons were. 3 months earlier, I'd been hired to analyze digital evidence for an internal investigation. Routine fraud case, or so I thought. The files contained recorded phone conversations between Sterling and someone named Vincent Marsh about moving money through offshore accounts. At first, I'd assumed it was legitimate business. Sterling was the CEO after all. But as I enhanced the digital quality and analyzed the metadata, certain phrases stood out, references to the Baltimore project that didn't match any company records. Discussions about keeping the board in the dark. Most damning, Sterling's clear instructions about transferring exactly $3.2 million to accounts that weren't listed in any corporate filings. The recordings had been submitted by Titanium's compliance department as part of a routine audit. Someone had flagged suspicious communications, and my job was simply to verify the digital evidence's authenticity. I'd confirmed the recordings were genuine, submitted my report, and assumed the matter would be handled internally. That was before I realized Sterling himself had ordered the investigation to identify the source of the leak. He wasn't trying to stop the fraud. He was trying to find out who knew about it. If you're wondering how corporate corruption gets exposed when the guilty party controls the investigation, make sure to subscribe, because what happened next proved that some secrets are too big to bury. Now, as I loaded my boxes into my truck, I understood why my position had suddenly become redundant. Sterling had received my authentication report 3 weeks ago. The same week he'd started having closed-door meetings with HR about departmental restructuring. I drove home to my house in Summit Ridge, thinking about the encrypted backup files in my personal server. Sterling might have eliminated my job, but he couldn't eliminate what I'd already discovered. That evening, I sat in my home office reviewing the digital files one more time. Sterling's voice was unmistakable, even through the phone compression. The timestamps showed the conversations had taken place over 6 months, with the most recent recording dated just 2 weeks ago. "Vincent, we need to accelerate the transfer schedule," Sterling's voice said clearly through my headphones. "The quarterly audit is coming up, and I need those Baltimore funds cleaned before anyone starts asking questions. 3.2 million is a lot to move quickly, came Vincent's reply. The usual channels can handle maybe half that without raising flags. Then find new channels. This money disappears completely or we both go down. I paused the playback and leaned back in my chair. Sterling wasn't just embezzling company funds. He was actively laundering money through a complex network designed to hide the theft from Titanium's board of directors. My phone buzzed with a text from Sage Thornfield, my younger brother who worked in corporate security. Heard about your layoff? Want to grab dinner tomorrow? I typed back, rain check, working on something important. The next morning I called Ember Nightshade at Crimson Investigation Services. We'd collaborated on several cases where her surveillance work complemented my digital evidence analysis. Archer, sorry to hear about Titanium, she said when I explained my situation. What do you need? Background research on Vincent Marsh and something called the Baltimore Project. Also, I need to know if Sterling's been meeting with anyone unusual lately. Ember was quiet for a moment. This sounds like more than a wrongful termination case. It is. I'll send you the details privately. 2 days later, Ember's preliminary report arrived via encrypted email. Vincent Marsh was a financial consultant based in Miami, specializing in offshore asset management for what the report diplomatically called privacy-focused clients. The Baltimore Project was a real estate development that had been abandoned 3 years ago after the primary investor pulled out. On paper, it looked like a failed business venture. In reality, it was the perfect vehicle for moving money through a series of shell companies. More interesting was Ember's surveillance data on Sterling. He'd been meeting regularly with someone at a downtown Denver hotel, always paid in cash, always in different rooms. The meetings had intensified over the past month, coinciding with when Sterling received my authentication report. Your boss is scared, Ember noted in her summary. People don't change their entire routine unless they're expecting trouble. That trouble arrived sooner than expected. On Friday morning, as I was reviewing Ember's findings, my doorbell rang. 3 people in dark suits stood on my porch, badges visible. Mr. Wolf, I'm Agent Phoenix Sterling with the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. We'd like to speak with you about your recent work at Titanium Dynamics. I invited them in, my mind racing. Someone else knew about the recordings, but who? Agent Sterling got straight to the point. We understand you were terminated earlier this week after completing a digital evidence analysis project. We're investigating potential financial irregularities at Titanium Dynamics and believe your analysis might be relevant to our case. How did you know about my analysis work? We received a tip from someone inside the company. They indicated you'd uncovered evidence of embezzlement, but were fired before you could report it to authorities. I thought about this carefully. Someone at Titanium had contacted the FBI independently, which meant Sterling's attempt to contain the situation had failed. I can provide the audio files and my technical analysis, I said, but I'll need immunity assurances since I technically obtained this evidence through my employment. Agent Sterling nodded. We've already prepared the paperwork. Your cooperation in this investigation is exactly what we need to move forward. Over the next hour, I walked the agents through my findings. The verified recordings, the timeline of money transfers, the connections between Sterling and Vincent Marsh. Everything I'd discovered during what I thought was routine digital forensics work. Mr. Wolf, this is significantly more than embezzlement, Agent Sterling explained after reviewing my evidence. Based on these recordings, we're looking at money laundering, securities fraud, and potentially conspiracy charges. What happens to Sterling? That depends on how cooperative he is when we execute the search warrant. Monday morning, I was having coffee at home when Sage called. You need to turn on Channel 7. Sterling's getting arrested. I switched to the news and watched as FBI agents led Sterling Blackwood out of Blackstone Tower in handcuffs. The reporter was explaining how a multi-million-dollar embezzlement scheme had been uncovered through anonymous whistleblower evidence. My phone rang immediately. Justice Kane from Shadowcrest Legal, the attorney I'd contacted about wrongful termination. Archer, I've been watching the news. Given recent developments, I think we should discuss your case differently. How so? Titanium Dynamics just lost their CEO to federal charges directly related to evidence you uncovered. Your termination looks like retaliation for discovering criminal activity. That's not wrongful termination anymore. That's whistleblower protection territory. Justice was right. Sterling hadn't fired me for budget reasons. He'd fired me to prevent me from discovering what I'd already found. 2 weeks later, I sat in Justice's office reviewing Titanium's settlement offer. The company's board, desperate to distance themselves from Sterling's crimes, had proposed full reinstatement, back pay, and a substantial bonus for my role in exposing the fraud. They're also offering to fund an expansion of your digital evidence department, Justice noted, essentially giving you carte blanche to build whatever you want. It was tempting, but something felt wrong about returning to a company that had tried to destroy my career to protect a criminal. What about starting my own digital forensics consulting firm? Justice smiled. I was hoping you'd ask that. 3 other companies have already contacted me about retaining your services. Apparently, word travels fast in the corporate investigation world. A month after Sterling's arrest, I opened Wolf Digital Forensics in a converted warehouse space downtown. The FBI had recommended me to several corporations seeking independent digital evidence analysis services. Ember joined as my investigation partner, and we quickly built a client base of companies that wanted honest forensic work without internal politics. Sterling pleaded guilty to 17 federal charges and received a 12-year sentence. Vincent Marsh was arrested in Miami and agreed to cooperate with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence. The $3.2 million was recovered and returned to Titanium Dynamics' shareholders. 6 months later, I was testifying in a federal courtroom about my digital evidence analysis methods when I noticed someone familiar in the gallery. Raven Cross, Sterling's former assistant, was taking notes as I explained how digital voice analysis had uncovered the money laundering scheme. After my testimony, she approached me outside the courthouse. "I wanted to thank you," she said quietly. "I was the one who contacted the FBI." That surprised me. "You were the whistleblower." I'd been seeing irregularities in Sterling's calendar and expenses for months. When you were fired so suddenly after completing that analysis project, I knew something was wrong. I copied the original digital files before anyone could delete them and sent them to the FBI. "Why didn't you tell me?" Raven looked down. "I was scared. Sterling had made it clear that anyone who caused problems would be eliminated. But when you lost your job for doing yours honestly, I realized staying silent was worse than speaking up." We talked for another hour about the investigation, the trial, and what had happened to other Titanium employees. Most had kept their jobs, but several executives who'd been aware of Sterling's activities had been quietly forced to resign. "The new CEO wants to hire you back," Raven mentioned as we prepared to leave. "Clean slate, your own budget, whatever you need." I thought about that offer as I drove back to my office. Returning to Titanium would be easier, more secure, but building something independent felt more honest. A year after opening Wolf Digital Forensics, we'd handled cases for 12 major corporations and testified in 8 federal trials. The business was growing beyond what I'd imagined possible, and I'd learned something important about the value of maintaining independence. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Sterling. "New case incoming. Corporate espionage investigation. Need your digital evidence expertise." I smiled and typed back, "Send the files. We'll get started immediately." That evening, I stood on the balcony of my new office, looking out over Denver's skyline. The lights of Blackstone Tower were visible in the distance, where Titanium Dynamics continued operating under new leadership. Sometimes the best revenge isn't fighting back. Sometimes it's building something better than what you lost and proving that honesty and competence eventually win over corruption and connections. My phone rang one more time. Sage calling to congratulate me on a newspaper article about the fastest-growing digital forensics consulting firm in Colorado. "You know what Dad would have said about all this?" he asked. I thought about our father, who taught us that doing the right thing wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. He'd say the truth has a way of surfacing no matter how deep people try to bury it. Exactly, and sometimes it takes an audio specialist to help it find its voice.